Glad to see you. Happy Friday. Happy Friday, everybody. Glad to see you all. I'm joined by Jody Daniels. I'm going to tell you about this very cool woman and her organization in a minute. But before I do, and before we jump into some of our conversation about cars and data, hopefully that's why you're here. Sorry, last week I was on a cruise in the Gulf of America, Mexico. I don't know. It still says Mexico on my GPS. So we'll call it Mexico for now. And I was in Panama the week before, where there were also interesting discussions as an American. And then I just got back from Canada. I am not going to Greenland next, but I am trying to better understand, of course, the tech policy and privacy landscape in 2025. In every one of those countries, people said, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And none of us have the answer, of course, but I do think that those who are looking at the current administration and the current Congress as, deregulatory, are missing the fact that there's a lot of complicated elements of the people who are in power, in partial power, having input, as well as for Trump, himself, obviously winning and, sometimes a bit more of a transactional nature, maybe is part of the president's particular, view, or some of the areas where he's had, a particular position, tariffs or other things. But as you saw with the debate over immigration, where the Silicon Valley tech folks, want H-1B visas, and the, maybe traditional kind of populist Trump folks, have made a major point of being, very hardcore against immigration and deportations and so forth. And, those are clashing. I think we're seeing that clash starting to happen a little bit in the privacy or AI policy world. So, for example, there are free market folks who are very excited about AI, Silicon Valley driven, and others around DC who don't want to see what they think is heavy-handed AI regulation. But where are the actual Republicans, on this? There's a very significant Texas bill sponsored by a very conservative, pro-life. He wants a Bitcoin reserve for Texas, a very senior Republican who passed a privacy bill, which started out really, really, very tough based on, I think his initial feedback, and then ended up being I'll say, much more pragmatic one. So much so that Senator Ted Cruz has said, hey, this Texas bill, which is, I guess industry friendly, is a good model for a federal bill. Now, he held hearings and meetings and briefings and talked to lots of stakeholders in Texas and put in a very significant bill. Now, he's I think, like in the privacy process, he's developing it and adding more nuance and eliminating some of the things that, some found onerous. But that was his gut, his sense as a Republican that, hey, he wanted to regulate AI because of, both optimism about what it can do, but also serious concerns. So we don't really know how things are going to play out. We do see some initial senior people who were previous appointees, the CTO, the President's Council on Science and Technology Advisors, Gail Slater, now at DOJ, who was the point person in the White House last time around, the current FTC commissioner, although he's been saying lots of things that are, very, I'd say, Trump friendly about his opposition to DEI and that sort of thing, but voted for much of the previous agency's agenda in terms of, enforcements that were pretty, clear. That certainly had disagreements with perhaps the vast extent of expansion that the previous chair had in place. But on many of the issues, traditional, certainly an expert. And so we shall see. We don't know what's going to happen on cars. The proposal is to eliminate the economic incentives for gas mileage. I think that's already been rolled out. The deductions that make buying an electric vehicle favorable. But again, Elon Musk, who says he's against those, also his company, which did not do very well this quarter, made a huge amount of its money trading those tax credits, right? So it's complicated. It's complicated. Let's talk about Jody for a second. Thank you for your support for FPF. Thank you for a lot of the advice you give to a good range of companies. If you're not hiring the biggest, most expensive, elaborate firm, and you want a smaller expert shop that is just as good and maybe even nimbler on some issues, Jody's become the go-to, where she with her spouse run Red Clover Advisors.
Red Clover Advisors, yes.
Why Clover? Why a Clover?
So Clover is the intersection when I started of data strategy, digital marketing, and data privacy.
Oh, now, why should you and I, be talking about cars? What the hell do we know about cars? I hate it when everybody in privacy thinks that they're an expert on every issue. They're all AI experts. Okay, we're reading, we're trying, but like we all are AI experts now. Okay. But everyone's, because we read things and we are consumers, we sometimes put on our hat. But the reality is, once you start working in a sector or counseling in a sector, you start appreciating that there is complexity, and the people who work in the space are not all idiots, right? And yes, sometimes they do the wrong thing, or they want to do the right thing and the business, won't cooperate. But a lot of times there's actually a lot more nuance and the reasons why things look and see what they do. But you actually started out years ago working in automotive, so you actually may know something about this.
I do. I have been. One, I actually just like cars. I think cars are fun. But professionally, I worked at Cox Enterprises, which owns Cox Automotive, which owns some brands that people listening might know, like autotrader.com and Kelley Blue Book, and then a suite of B2B businesses. So if anyone has rented a car, gone to a dealership, test driven a car, researched a car, that's touched Cox in some way. And so I was there, and that's actually how I even got started in privacy, because I built a targeted ad network at autotrader.com. So utilizing all this information many moons ago. And it's been really interesting because it's always been about data. All the way back then, when we didn't even have the proliferation of laws like we have now, we were still talking about all this data, what can be used, what can't be used, what should be used, what shouldn't be used, and how it ties to privacy.
Yeah, it's amazing how a vast amount of sort of the concern in the media or the broader public about privacy harm ends up being, will I be personally sort of exposed? Will someone call me out for where I've gone or what I've done, or my orientation or something that's going to be revealed? Or who I was with that I don't want well known. Oh, it could be used by insurance companies. That will be a bad thing. And a lot of times we're like, no, insurance companies don't want or get that data. But maybe when it comes to cars, they do. And then the other angle, of course, is advertising. Is it going to be used for advertising? And maybe we can walk through some of those. Okay, so let's put on our consumer hat first, and then we'll maybe talk about some of the complexities and the compliance issues and the legal issues. What's your pet peeve of like what's not working right when it comes to cars and data today?
Well, so people are getting in their cars because we want to get from point A to point B, and people are picking a long list of variety of features to make that experience better. Nowadays, it's all software. I mean, even just to turn the car on, it's all driven by software. And so then when people are driving, and what exactly is being collected, it's not clear. I was home a couple of weeks ago. My dad was trying to press his music, and a little pop-up came up, and it was a privacy notice. And he just, went through it. I don't even think he read it because he just wanted his music. I, of course, am sitting in the back seat thinking, but wait, what's actually being collected? And don't you want to know? So for me, I feel like there's just this huge disconnect of consumers who don't know what's actually being collected and what's happening behind the scenes. And then if you fast forwarded and they learned something and they didn't like it, then they would be really mad. And I feel like we have a huge education problem on the consumer side.
So let me debate you a bit on that, right? Because have we solved this issue after 20 years when it comes to like even websites where now we're pinging people with cookie banners and people still, and we're putting little, symbols on the corner of ads. I routinely used to ask people in a room, even a sophisticated room, what is this little triangle eye on? Does that mean the ad is kosher? Like what is that about? And most people say, oh, there's more information about the product. And so we haven't succeeded in ads. We haven't succeeded in apps. Now I'm getting in the car. I'm driving. Right now, my car has this orange light on. And when I look it up in the book, because it's certainly not intuitive, it looks like, I don't know, wheels are going to fall off or something based on the picture. When I look at it in the book, it's either engine trouble or my gas cap's not closed well, right? Now, this is the stuff that the car actually is supposed to be talking to me about. And when I go to the service person for it, they're like, nah, we just turned it off. Don't just ignore it. Right. So is it conceivable that we're going to use that UX and is that maybe the right channel even? One of our former staffers here who ran our auto group, which includes the privacy leads at most of the major auto companies, but now is at one of the auto companies. She was polling colleagues the other day, and she said, "Well, where would you want to get this? Right? Would you want to get it on the dashboard, and we just need to figure out the right testing and the right symbols, like maybe a little location. We know what location looks like now because we see on our phone something that tells us. So maybe we can use, if Apple doesn't tell us we're not allowed to use their, copyrighted symbol, but like, Android, everybody uses a symbol. Maybe we could have something. And if it blinks, it means like location is going somewhere. So maybe there is room to do it in the car. Maybe it should be on an app if it's just, not every vehicle has an app, but a lot do nowadays, or maybe on a website. I mean, are you more optimistic than I that it is? I'm down on communicating complicated stuff to consumers because I think most people, they're busy. They're like, they got a kid on one angle and they got their groceries and they're like filling up gas and like, just tell me if there's a problem that I really need to do something, like go take my car in before it like catches on fire. If not, you don't want to think about it unless I'm some geek who wants to go research it, right? Like, are you more optimistic that we can?
I am optimistic. And I think if we go back, people would buy a car and it just had basic functions. And you became familiar with engine light, gas light, brake fluid, all the things. There were icons because people are icon driven and it's universal. Icons work really well for all those reasons. But we were trained on what it is we needed to know to address the issues in the car. As the car has gotten more complicated, and it's, I think, basically software on wheels, the expectation for what people should know about their car has increased. People can now figure out, well, how do I how do I get my contacts? How can I use Bluetooth? So people are moving, as they've had to use more complex software-driven features. And in my view, they need to know how to actually use these different pieces. We research now what the gas mileage is. We research how often you're supposed to change, the oil or the maintenance and a long list of other items. People don't necessarily get that in the little infotainment screen. They learn that somewhere else. So much like how cars are becoming these massive data collectors, I think there's the ability to get all of that elsewhere. Should it all be on the little screen like how my dad was trying to just fast forward? No, because he now is driving. That's not a good time to read. And he just wants his music. So there's a time and a place to have that right information. Maybe it's an app, maybe it's a website, maybe it's when you buy the car, maybe it's, there's a lot of maybes that we can sort through. And so I am optimistic.
In some sense, there's a change, right? Like the younger generation has a different view, right? A certain generation or people who live in rural areas or people who are car people, right? A car meant independence, right? A car meant you could go anywhere. You could drive across America. We have strong privacy rules. Can the cops peer into your car? Like it's like your, home. You've got various expectations of privacy. For many people, it was the first time they were private, right? Like you could go and you'd make out in your car. You could go on a date in your car. You could go and be independent. And that comes with a certain, you've seen the ads, right? It's the Ford 150 driving across the prairie. It's like this American, autonomy thing. On the other hand, it's a computer and Apple and Google are in the car and want to be the key players when it comes to infotainment, and you auto people are kind of competing or kind of cooperating. And look at where people competing with the platforms have ended up going. We've had ad tech, we've had social media. People used to love ad tech. It kept the web free. Now policymakers want to restrict it in every way because they're so concerned. Social media, great, connecting the world, the Arab Spring, and now we're worried about it and we're looking to restrict it in every way. And so my argument to some of the auto companies is you don't want to be viewed the way, if you read most popular media stories recently, right? It's like, oh my God, my car is spying on me. My car is, selling data. you need to grab hold of the narrative by recognizing that you are in the data business. You say that, but being in the data business and doing it either in a trusted way, do you want to be Apple, right? Where whatever goes on, they've managed their brand in a way that, has a luster of privacy. Do you want to be, Apple? And look, there are positive things happen. BMD was walking us through, for instance, the other day, how, the technology that ensures that you're not falling asleep or veering into the other lane, if that was being sent off the car and available to rat you out, you might be quite concerned. And so they designed that information to stay on the vehicle. So you do get, the helpful nudge that you're looking away from the road for a long time, looking at the kid in the back seat, looking at the radio, look at it. But that's not going to be there to be held, to hold you accountable. But let's talk about the issue that's created a lot of alarm recently. And that's safe driving apps. Now, I have Erie Insurance and I have their safe driving app, and it shares data about me when I'm driving or when I'm in an Uber. Or I noticed the other day, I was on a cruise. I don't know. It was like reporting that I was driving well. It pays me like $7 or $8 a month, and I can just easily transfer that like onto Amazon, and it subsidizes some of my Amazon shopping. Okay, so I get it. I signed up. Obviously, I know about it. But the criticism is that a number of the companies that provide these were sharing the data. People didn't know they were signed up. Maybe the dealers who kind of do a whole bunch of things when you get you set up were just sort of filling it out for them, or maybe they just downloaded the app and didn't know that there was some disclosure somewhere that said it would be used in some ways by third parties. And evidently some insurance companies were getting this and were using this in an adverse way. And of course, the backlash, smart reported stories by Kashmir Hill of the New York Times and others, the backlash was terrible, terrible, terrible. And I always like to have a little bit of a contradictory thing first to kind of really wait. All right. So here's my devil's advocate on this. We started speeding like maniacs during COVID. Nobody was on the roads. We were all speeding, and fatalities, despite the fact that the roads were empty, went up. And evidently, we've continued to have spikes in fatalities. I drive a lot up and down I-95. I've got some friends who are expert wine enthusiasts in Baltimore. I don't drink too much, but I drive in DC to Baltimore. And there are these tractor trailers coming at 100 miles an hour, merging in, like driving me off the road, or people driving like they're on some Fortune 500 race. And I cannot wait for self-driving cars to be, replacing those trucks. And I'm like, if these were accurate, these safety apps, and maybe they're not, but if they were accurate, and the insurance companies tell me they only penalize the people driving like criminals, is it wrong? No, is it wrong? What if the default in the future is you don't get to opt in whether you're penalized when you speed, like the red camera catches you, it catches you. Should my car report me if now again, let's make the cutoff high, right? Like 100 miles an hour, and you weren't like taking your spouse to like have a baby in the hospital or something, right? Like 100 miles an hour and weaving. Why shouldn't your car or the app that by default is on your thing report you to your insurance company? Again, we're not putting points on your thing. We're not taking away your license. Maybe it wasn't you, blah, 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 blah. But can we think a little bigger than the individual? Should the societal default be, or is that opening up a dangerous thing? Next thing I know, I'll order some pizza and my health insurance, will go up, like that famous ACLU pizza commercials. Anybody listening remember that? If you can post a link, we'll send you some FPF swag. Can you post a link to the famous ACLU pizza video? Kara Selke, an expert on location data, does it require it on all the time? It does. It does have a mode where if it tells me, hey, I'm burning down your battery, it goes off, but it does want access all the time. I'm hoping it somehow knows when it's driving. Although the Texas case, were you following the insurance case against Allstate? It sounds like what they were trying to do is know when you were in the car so as to be able to tie it to, yes, the insurance data is relevant. Anyway, my devil's advocate is societal benefit. Who said that the trade-off needs to be express consent before insurance data goes? If it was accurate and if the cutoff was people driving like criminals.
So I think the key there is how we would all be informed. Like today, we all know, or many people are concerned about speeding, not all, but many people are concerned about speeding because of the risk of a ticket. That's the consequence. So if here I know the risk of doing that is that information is going to go, and it is just so blatant that is what's going to happen, then that's the conversation. Do we just shift into that? But in that shift, it wouldn't just be this kind of hidden thing. And I think that's where everyone's gotten upset and some of the companies have gotten in trouble. It's just not clear in the expectation of where we are. Do I, like the sign that's on our little side road that's put up by the police to try and show you if it's 35 miles an hour and you're going 40 and it like yells at you when you're going down, that's a natural, oh, thank you for telling me. But I don't think it collected anything. Could that little device collect something? Maybe, but then it would also have this massive sign like the big traffic cameras. It's collecting information and off you go. So for me personally, I want to be safe on the roads. I hate those crazy tractor drivers and the people going 100 miles an hour. So if I think about that societal benefit, yes, makes sense. However, it's just one of those, when you drive, this is how it would be then. So blatantly clear, just like everyone knows you get a speeding ticket if there's someone there and is going to get you.
Now, look, let me continue to play devil's advocate. People, don't yell at me. I want the privacy here, but I want to push on the various issues that I know some have raised. Okay. Currently, insurance ends up not always being very fair. You live in a certain zip code, you're going to be penalized because of your zip code. You're going to be penalized automatically because of your age. This, and again, when I might have a disease, it's not fair. I can't do anything about it. I shouldn't therefore never be able to get insurance or be singled out. But if you smoke, you don't have to smoke. You smoke, we know you're going to smoke. We're going to charge you more on your insurance. You're going to be a higher risk individual again. So insurance today ends up maybe being very biased, and poor people may end up having to pay higher rates. People who drive at night or drive a certain amount, it's not fair in a economic way, in a racially balanced way, and so on and so forth. When we first started working on, there's a new law. I think it's being deferred because nobody wants to deal with it. But there is a law that says all new vehicles after XYZ year, I forget the exact year, need to be built with a passive blood alcohol detection system. So car should not start or should not be able to drive well if you're stinking drunk. And it needs to do this through either finger, blood, alcohol, touch, or there are a couple of other technologies. None of them seem to be accurate enough, but it is in the law. It was supported by Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And when I first heard about it and started talking to some of the people in the industry who kind of working on this mandate, which again has been deferred, there's a rulemaking DOT is working on. I don't think anybody wants to tell that dude with the Ford 150 who has a gun in his glove compartment and who has a couple of beers at his local bar, this truck's not going to start. So who knows when and if this will get around. However, it is in the law. It was passed a couple of years ago. And we did some consumer surveying and we talked to some of the civil liberties groups. And you might have thought that their knee-jerk reaction would be like, oh no, huge privacy invasion. But ACLU and others are aware that today you get stopped maybe because of your skin color or because of the model of your car. And it could lead to an altercation. And, it ain't very fair today the way we police people's driving. You don't end up behind bars in certain neighborhoods and maybe even based on your skin color. And in other places, we do see unfairness. And so they were like, well, as long as it doesn't send the data off the car, it just doesn't let the car start, and you avoid interaction with the whole criminal justice system, and your car just doesn't start, and it's everybody don't get to drive like a maniac. And our friends at Mothers Against Driving, have some points here, but let's just don't use video. They don't want video. They don't want facial recognition, that kind of thing. Surprisingly supportive. So why are we locking the default to where it is today are there no places where usage-based insurance, sort of where I can be responsible, where it is in my control, is it maybe more fair to give savings to people who drive well by default? Let's not even, what do you think?
I think that's fair. I'm a really good driver and I have to pay, I'm in a city and I'm having to pay for my community and how their driving habits are. So if for me, again, you kind of mentioned how the car is independent and it's mine and it's that sense of freedom. From an insurance side, if I can control that and I'm aware, so do I get to provide that information so that it's accurate and be able, based on how well I am driving, that it's going to favor me?
But
Well,
that doesn't really work in terms of capturing and penalizing the bad people who are not going to be the ones opting in, right? I mean, I'm arguing that, look, when we think about self-driving,
I don't think it has to be opt-in. It has to be knowledge. It has to be just clear. I mean, for me, if I think about basic privacy principles, it is notice, right? So informed notice. People don't like to be surprised on anything. And here we're talking about a really important item. If you think about it, we are entrusting other people every single time you get behind the wheel of a 1,000-ton moving missile that we're trusting. And nowadays it's being run by software and data is being collected. So if this experience can be made safer, because at the end of the day, we are trying to get from point A to point B in a safe way and maybe an enjoyable one along that journey. However we can do that safely but informed, to me, makes a lot of sense. And it's a lot of variables like you have here on this infographic, trying to balance all of those pieces out. I just always try and bring it back to the basics of what's the end goal and what do people expect.
Gwen Takagawa links to us the famous ACLU pizza video, folks. So let's send her some sucks, please.
Thanks, Gwen, for listening. It's great to see you. And I am not surprised that Gwen was able to find that. Gwen is amazing.
And Jody, let's walk in. Let's do some educating. And that maybe some people here know all the. Maybe some people are like, okay, I get location, but like, what are we talking about? Like, it's not just location. What are the other sorts of data? This infographic, I think, our team put together a number of years ago. We did just recently update it. This might be the updated one. Do you want to walk through what are the other kind of data sets that we're talking about that are relevant here besides location data?
So license plate is a really popular one right now. And while that is public, everyone driving down, I guess in theory, I could like write down all the license plates. We have all these different license plate readers, and how is that getting interconnected with other information? You're having where the let's take biometric. So some of those, and then your interconnection with those smart devices. Is it going to open with any of the biometrics? And does it store it for just that purpose? Does it store it in its internal memory? Does it share it with any other third party? So just as like a really simple one, if I have my device and I connect it, a lot of people think it's just temporarily connected, but it actually might get stored into that like, internal memory of that infotainment system. And then what else of that information might be shared elsewhere? There's a lot on this map. We can't cover it all, but Jules, what is interesting to you here?
Well, I'd like to really think about the categories. So we talked location. We talked about your driving ability. You mentioned the apps and all the interactions you have with the apps. And obviously your phone is with you now. There are biometric examples, whether you're, attention, whether you're looking away from the road. In a lot of the self-driving vehicles, who is in the car? How many people are in the car? Is your seatbelt on, right? They need to know, should we close the door now? Are you in the back seat? Are you trying to climb over to the front seat, which you should not be doing in the self-driving vehicle? All of the sensor information about your car, how far you've driven, right? You may have told your insurance you only drove this far or that far. The event data recorder, of course, has long been required. Only kind of kicks in, to capture and keep information retroactively right before an accident. Knows and can be used and is in your control in theory if you're the person with the vehicle doesn't send the data off. I'll tell you one thing I've been working on in particular. You rent the car, and the data from the person behind who is in the vehicle. So I raised this with some of the auto companies, and they're like, well, that's not us. That's the rental car people who have to clear, the data. We have mechanisms to delete that. So I went to some of the rental car companies, and they listened. They heard me out, and they're like, listen, fella, first of all, the models we get are often not the general consumer, model. They're often, distributed specifically to us. Each vehicle, even in the same model, if it has like the LE versus the SE package, it's got a better infotainment system, which is what's used for the deletion and so on and so forth. So we need to put together all the rules for how to go through the multiple steps. There's no one button there. And by the way, on a busy day, when we have a line, do you know how much time we have to turn over and clean the car? Do you know what our problem is right now? Our problem is poopy diapers. What? Yeah, people change their baby in the back seat and they got nowhere to throw the diaper. They put it in the glove compartment, and then someone rents the car and our staff haven't cleared out the glove compartment and it starts to smell, and boy, do we get hell. What do you want us doing? Some delete thing, right? But my argument to the auto companies is you want to be trusted. And this is so obvious to the average user. They get it. Like, hey, I can see the addresses and so on and so forth. I got a call from a friend. He said, you know any of the CEOs of auto companies? I said, I know the privacy people. He says, oh, well, I want to send a CEO an email because I rented a car. And I actually rented it from an auto company's sort of used car sort of thing. So I'm actually in business, directly, not with Hertz, but with the auto company. And I know that the person who rented this car behind me was a celebrity on the morning news because I could see all of their contacts. And if I go to the media, I'm like, I don't know, you ought to be like blackmailing anybody. He's like, no, it's a data breach. Maybe they'll give me a bounty. I'm like, he forward me an email. I'll try to forward it on to the right people. He ended up getting paid a couple of grand, I guess, to go away. But like, this needs to be fixed. I know the companies are working on this, but again, every car, every model, and also they have a very long, they don't like fix things for like next year. They're working on models, that are multiple years, down the road. So, all right, let's just talk for a minute for our people in the auto industry. Some of the compliance issues, obviously, the data might be covered by state laws in terms of it being a sale. Biometric laws may cover some of the data. In Europe, portability has become an issue. You need to be able to move your data from one, vehicle to another. What are some of the other specific sort of opting out and letting people delete? Also a little bit, complicated in this ecosystem. How do you get consent if you're not the driver or the owner, right? It might be about the passengers. How do you deal with, the right entity here? What are some of the other key things that you think we ought to
Well, I'll just add on the consent side. And we talked a little bit about it before, but I actually rented a car recently and I feel like I'm pretty savvy and actually read these things. And the options that appeared, it was, am I okay with sharing it for analytics? Am I okay with sharing it for advertising? Am I okay with sharing it? It would keep going. Honestly, which way the toggle even went wasn't clear. And there's a lot of information. So obviously, anytime that they're trying to actually grab consent to comply with any of these laws, and the method in which it was presented is just kind of, it's complicated in of itself. And then, of course, knowing any of the third parties that it shared it with, where we have all these different privacy laws where you either have to state, here's the third party, here's the sub-processor, the ability to manage those privacy rights and know where it went. Those are going to be tricky if you don't really have a good, solid understanding of, I collect this kind of data and these are all the people that I'm sharing it with.
Yeah, and then we have the new series of state laws that are very tightly focused on minimization, and data can only be collected if it's sensitive, if it's expressly for the service expressly requested by the consumer, which obviously some of these things are accepted and required and critical. And some of them are obviously not. One closing tip, if you sell your car, you would not sell your computer without cleaning it off and clearing it. You would not sell your phone. If you sell your car, you need to wipe it as well. The driver's manual usually has the instructions. Privacy for Cars has an app that has a lot of information about the data collected and the privacy policies and so forth of your cars. Jody's expertise is not just auto, it is across a whole range of specific technology issues. One of our listeners doesn't remember having car repair info be provided to Carfax. Well, let me flag one interesting thing. You know how your auto repair shop, first thing they do when you check in your car is they run out there and they look at the odometer information? Yeah, that's interesting. They need to know it, maybe to know what your next service is. But that information is often made available to third parties who have an interest in knowing that information and feeding some of those third-party data systems. So it is not only the auto folks. And again, one of the complexities is a lot of auto companies are branding and design and managing a big assembly chain, but there are major tier 1 suppliers and tier 2 suppliers and infotainment. And again, the app on your phone is being mirrored, and is it Android Auto and Apple? Where do they fit into this mix as well? So super complicated. Anyway, glad to introduce Jody more broadly to more of my community, although we know so many people in common, but really thoughtful. Do reach out if you have need of her expertise. I've enjoyed being able to lean on her for both input and expertise, and look forward to collaborating on other issues going forward. Happy Friday, everybody. Jody, thank you for joining me. We have an auto section on our website with all kinds of things. If you like this infographic, it is released under the license that says you can use it. Just give us credit, please. But otherwise, have fun with it and use it. There is a page 2 to this. There we go. Look at that. Awesome. And Jody has a printed version of it. Do you? Yes.
I do. It's a great infographic. I highly recommend everyone to go and grab it.
Go and grab it. Great to see you. Happy Friday, all. And thanks to the comms team in the background for helping make things go so smoothly.
Thanks, everyone, for joining.